Down to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the #1 liquid-fueled, liquid lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast, and I am your cowboy hat, sort of. I mean, it's kind of a straw hat, but we'll call it a cowboy hat. Cowboy hat wearing American-loving host, Rick. Oh my gosh. There is so much. I have got so much here, but I'm going to be honest with you. I probably won't be able to get all the way through it because we have a very interesting discussion that is occurring between a couple of right-leaning pundits who also happen to be lawyers, and it's playing itself out a little bit on Twitter. And for those of you that don't have it, I'm going to show you a little bit of what's going on. I'm going to kind of explain things about that, and we'll go from there. Also, I have a absolutely fantastic pet of the week, and it's a tribute to a pet that has passed. And it's pictures and video. It's kind of both. And so yeah, so I've got that coming up tonight as well. So stay tuned, grab your drink, and let's get right to it. Of course, tonight is Whiskey Wednesday. Oh, what the? There we go. Whiskey Wednesday. It's like Taco Tuesday, but for badasses. And of course, speaking of badasses, over on the Rumble channel, they are taking their pants off because apparently it is No Pants Wednesday over there. And yeah, my Rumble crew is they are kind of interesting, to say the least. You can join them, of course, by heading over to Rumble and signing up for an account. And then, of course, once you get there, make sure that you follow the Whiskey Musings Broadcast channel so you can get alerted every time I go live. Okay. So tonight I am drinking, because of course everybody wants to know, Buffalo Trace. I've got the Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey Buffalo Trace going into my gullet tonight. And while I sit here and yeah. So anyway. All right, so I already talked about Rumble and its and the usual band of malcontent miscreants over there. I also got to give a call out to Becky and Tommy and Mark. I think I've seen the three of you over on Facebook. Welcome, thank you for joining. This is awesome, and I see a couple new faces that finally have picked up on the live stream. For an example, like the Inked Up one over on Rumble. And let's see, I haven't seen Kim Long in a while, and they're over on Rumble as well. And of course, the typical, Amy Jean, Outlaw Dogs, 3 Chevy, Bam, Daybreak, all of my usual whiskey warriors over there hanging out on the Rumble channel. Thank you all. And I can't forget Bonnie either. And thank you all for showing up. I do appreciate it because, of course, if I didn't have you, I'd be talking into just the blank ethosphere, and that would be a bit of a problem. Plus, I also know of a couple of young gentlemen who listen strictly on the audio portion over on Spotify. They download and listen after the live programs. So I got to give a shout out to them as well. Okay, so let's get right to it. I actually kind of have a bit of news for tonight for our for my sponsor tonight. And tonight's sponsor, of course, is TGRN, True Grit Roots Network, champions independent artists while paying respect to the pioneers who shaped modern roots music featuring outlaw country, blues, and rock with a unique twist of urban that is carefully selected and purposely put together. We are the radio highway that connects the back roads, highways, and city streets to your favorite dance hall, roadhouse, and juke joint. TGRN provides original, exclusive programming and interviews that are produced and hosted by our own team of DJs, hosts, and personalities. Find us on the web at tgrn.net to download our app in the App Store and from Google Play. Alternatively, you can find us in the Live 365 catalog of digital radio stations and through the Live 365 app as well. Live 365 is also on Roku. And as a kind of a precursor announcement, don't forget, on September 5th, TGRN will go and launch our first direct genre-specific channel called TGRN Blues. That will be the music that will take over the airwaves for us. But I also have a small announcement. The announcement is that TGRN, something that I and my partners have been working on in the background, TGRN is looking to launch a talk-only channel. That's right, a talk-only channel, which will be focused on, for the most part, conservatives. That's the surprise. It's planning on coming in. We're targeting the first weekend in November for launching that. So that will actually change. So stay tuned for that. But I want to let you guys know that we have a Facebook group already stood up. It just happened. So head on over to Facebook if you have a Facebook account. I know some of you don't, but head on over to Facebook and check out our TGRN Talk public group over there. And so we are expanding rapidly into both the music space and the talk space as well. And hey, you might actually see the Whiskey Musings broadcast start transmitting over there. Maybe. All right, enough teasing, enough throwing things out. Let's get right into it. Okay, so obviously the talk of the town tonight, and probably will be for the rest of the week, I'll be honest with you, and potentially even for the rest of the election cycle, is Donald Trump's fourth indictment. Yes, his fourth indictment. And yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. This one actually has a potential for a little bit of merit. And the reason being is, well, I mean, I'll explain a little bit more as we go along, but there are some specific reasons as to why this one might be the harder one out of the four that have come up. The harder one that is potentially going on. And Music Man, I just saw your comment here. How about a newsletter? Yeah, we're working on that too. It'll be the TGRN Talk newsletter. We've been talking about it in the background, and so that'll probably be coming out as well. So yeah. Anyway, it looks like Outlaw Dog's already grabbed over on Rumble, already grabbed the Facebook link. So Outlaw, if you can head on over to Facebook and drop that into the chat over there, into the Facebook chat, that'd be great too. I appreciate that. Or actually what I might be able to do is just let me see if I can just grab the text here. Give me just a second. Nope, I don't want that. Apparently I can't do it. Anyway, at least not in the current scenario. Okay, so let me just point out. So first of all, yes, the Georgia indictment, at least the way it's been laid out, is seriously in question. But out of all of the indictments that he's had so far, save the New York one, out of all the indictments, this one presents the most legal risk to Trump. In the fact that there are some questions with regards to whether or not he can actually avoid it by pardoning himself. And so we have well, let's put it this way. The last several years, we have run into a lot of constitutional questions, constitutional things that have been going on. And I'll be honest with you, for someone who loves the Constitution like I do and loves to dig into them and everything, this is my candy land. I am just having a blast because of the fact that the entire thing is revolving around our federalist system and the Constitution, and whether certain things are constitutionally, one way versus the other. Can we do things? Can we not? So the next 2, maybe 3 years are going to be incredibly interesting for someone such as myself, and hopefully someone and other people like you, like my Whiskey Warrior P1s that are out there. But the first thing happened, the first thing that's bringing some of this in question is, and this, I don't know how much of an error this actually is, but the question is ultimately going to be whether or not this mistake gets applied at a legal kind of level. So let me tell you what I'm talking about. What I am talking about here in particular is the issue where the clerk apparently posted the charges prior to the actual grand jury voting coming in. And so what ended up happening is the Fulton County clerk apparently says she accidentally hit send instead of save. And so, it's kind of interesting. I can understand this is a mistake, a true mistake from it, but it opens up a potential for possibly a procedural error that could derail the entire thing. And so, it's basically she basically sent it out, and it was almost originally, and sent it out ahead of time, and it was almost originally, or posted it ahead of time, and it was almost, lined up word for word with the one that finally came out. And she called it a dry run or an unofficial document that indicated the upcoming indictment. She said that if it had been the official copy, it would have had an official stamp on it. She's saying it's fictitious, it wasn't real, so on and so forth. And so the questions are starting to mount in terms of whether or not this was already preordained or preconditioned to be sent out. So, the thing about it is, though, is that there is a possibility, according to this next article that showed up in the Epoch Times, that the premature posting may give the Trump defense a line of attack, according to this legal analyst that talks about this. And so the premature posting, this is in the piece, the premature posting of the charges in Georgia's case against former President Donald Trump threatens to further complicate these controversial proceedings, legal analysts say. On the afternoon of August 14th, as the grand jury was still hearing evidence from witnesses, Reuters reported that the Fulton County Court website had posted and then taken down a charging sheet containing 13 counts against President Trump. Hours later, the court clerk's office called it a fictitious document, adding that no official document had yet been filed. When the indictment was handed up by the grand jury at about 9 p.m. and later unsealed, it was revealed that the 13 counts recorded matched those from the sheet briefly posted earlier that day. According to legal experts, this turn of events created an additional avenue for defense lawyers to attack. Mike Allen, a former prosecutor and current defense lawyer in Ohio, told the Epoch Times that he had never seen anything like this in his 43 years as an attorney. Now, okay, digression from the piece, I'm just going to tell you this. Medical forms and legal forms, you have to get them right. You have to follow procedure to the letter, because if you screw up, you potentially could open yourself up for legal problems. And so her doing this, I don't know, it might open up some things. Others, back to the piece, others who have decades of experience in court filings were also at a loss to know, or as to how such a mistake could have been made. The Georgia officials initially offered no explanation, but on the afternoon of the 15th, County Court Clerk Shay Alexander released a statement saying the document posted was a test sample document generated from a trial run of the court filing system. She was anticipating issues that arise with potentially large indictments and used charges that pre-exist in the court's computer system to conduct a trial run. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that 13 of them were exactly the same as what was finally certified. So this is sort of weird. So anyway, Mr. Allen remains skeptical. He says, I don't believe any of it. It makes no sense. The copy would have had been given to them by someone in the prosecutor's office as an excuse. It's laughable. Mr. Allen said that given the high-profile nature of the case against the former U.S. president and 18 alleged co-conspirators, one would assume that extra care would have been taken to avoid such a snafu. There's no way that it should have happened, or that it should happen, he said. And if it does, the prosecutor has an obligation to explain what happened. She can't just stand up there and arrogantly refuse to answer. It just looks horrible. It looks like a predetermined result. That erases any notion that the process was fair to the defendants. So this could turn into a bit of a problem, to be honest with you, with regards to this entire premature release. Now, he does state that he doesn't believe that it was intentional. Okay. So let's think about this for a second. What happened a couple years ago that got released a little early that fundamentally changed the thought process and certain things within our court system with regards to a certain medical procedure that includes women? Oh, that's right. The leaked opinion piece of the Dobbs decision. Yeah. So anyway, the thing about it is that this just doesn't look right. It really doesn't. And she's probably trying to fall on the sword. I don't know anything about her. She could be completely honest. She could be saying the right thing. But the thing about it is that whenever you're dealing with something this high profile, you had better make sure that you have your I's dotted and your T's crossed. This could potentially open up a question and a defense and a possibility that they could bring the court clerk in under oath to tell her side of the story if there is some question as to whether or not this was predetermined. And so this is a big thing. This is a big thing. Now, I do want to point out too that we have to recall, or remember, I should say, the individual who was running around doing all those press junkets. Yes. Do you remember her? This young, like 30-something teacher or whatever who was running around on all of the liberal outlets, media outlets, who was talking about wanting to do the Trump thing. Let's take a look at this really quick one more time.
Personally want to hear from the former president. I wanted to hear from the former president, but honestly, I kind of wanted to subpoena the former president because I got to swear everybody in. And so I thought it'd be really cool to get 60 seconds with President Trump of me looking at him and being like, do you solemnly swear? And me getting to swear him in. I kind of just thought that would be an awesome moment.
Okay, so here's the thing. All right, you put this with the fact that they released the charges early, and now we have a potential of malfeasance and misfeasance to possibly indicate that we're dealing with a setup. See, it's stuff like this that really causes all kinds of problems. She never should have been talking, number one. But if you also think about it, I would bet that at least half of that grand jury, and for those of you that don't know this, when you have a grand jury, you'll have like 23 people, generally speaking. They differ depending upon the state and everything, but you'll have a grand jury of a certain number of people, and typically, in order to indict, all you have to do is have a majority opinion in order to push it into a indictment. Now, keep in mind, you can indict a ham sandwich. All right. You can indict anybody for anything at any time. All you have to do, all the prosecution has to do, and the question for a grand jury is basically, do you believe that a crime has been committed, and based on the evidence that the prosecution has put forward, do you believe that this should be held over for trial, or should this go for trial? Now, there's no way that the defense actually has much of conversation. They are present, but they don't usually have the ability. It's not like a real trial. It's not like a full-on, prosecution defense crossover, blah, 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 like you've seen on all the law TVs. It basically just is where they say, hey, do you as the jury, do you believe that a crime was been committed, and do you think that we should go to trial for it? That's pretty much about the only thing that a grand jury is really interested in. And based off of this, this video, and then you have the addition of the pre-release of the document, the defense could make a case where it's time to, dismiss the charges on procedural grounds. And so that's a potential issue right there. Now, obviously the fourth indictment adds to Donald Trump's stardom, let's say, because of the fact that Donald Trump seems to get stronger with every single indictment. And of course, for those of us who are out here like myself, who basically look at this as a weaponization of the DOJ and a weaponization of the legal system against a political opponent, the primary political opponent of the current sitting political party, you might have a bit of a issue with this entire process. And so given the cases and how they're being built and put together, it's really hard to sit here and say, based on everything that is here, it's really hard to sit here and say that this isn't political persecution. I know it is. Okay. I know it is, but it's potentially political persecution. Now, why is the Georgia case a little bit different than, say, the DC case? Why is it being tried in the state? Well, the way that this is working, so you have a RICO charge, okay, which is racketeering. I can't remember what all the letters stand for, but RICO cases were basically built and put together and developed specifically for the mob. And the reason being is because the mob had, you had the bosses, and the bosses were the ones that were giving the orders to do all of this stuff, but they could never get the bosses because the bosses would basically, every time you drug a boss into the court, you would have to prove that boss's mindset. You would have to prove what that boss knew prior to the actual act, or even, after the actual act. And so what ended up happening is you had hitmen, for an example, that were going around committing murders, and they were committing murders at the behest of the bosses. But what was ending up occurring was the fact that the hitman were going down for it, and they would not be able to catch the bosses. And so what they ended up doing is they created these RICO charges. Now, it was done at the federal level initially by the FBI in order to go after the, all of the mobs and everything else. But Georgia pretty much patterned their state RICO laws after the federal RICO laws. And so they are very close to one another in terms of what they are, how they get charged, so on and so forth. And so why they chose to do it, and by the way, this prosecutor, I can't even think of her name, but this DA is essentially very, she has a habit of doing these things. Okay. Now the challenge here that you have whenever you deal with RICO charges is, of course, you have to be able to demonstrate a collusionary organization that would lead to a criminal enterprise. In other words, they have to prove that the people that are in this indictment, that they all are together, and that they all criminally conspired to do this deed. And so, but they don't have to prove intent. So that's really the big thing is they don't, in a normal law, and thank you, 3 Chevy, racketeering, influenced, and corrupt organization is what the RICO stands for. But the normal laws that we have, they have to prove intent. And under the RICO laws or the RICO statutes, they don't have to prove intent. All they have to do is prove that there was some type of a collusionary nature between the people that were involved, and they can take them down as a part of RICO charges. Okay. So the biggest challenge, of course, is that they're going to have to, thank you. Fannie T. Willis. Fannie Willis is the DA down there. But so what they're going to have to prove, honestly, is they're going to have to prove that Donald Trump and the other named people were essentially a criminal enterprise. And so this is really strange that they're doing this, because we actually have a criminal enterprise sitting in the White House right now in the name of the Biden family. And they would be much closer to what you are talking about with regards to things like demonstrating a criminal enterprise and so on and so forth. So it's going to be interesting to see this entire thing play out. But something happened the other day, and of course, Mark Levin, for those of you that don't know, Mark Levin is actually a lawyer. He worked in the Reagan administration in the DOJ, the Department of Justice. And he's a smart guy, and he is very well-versed on the Constitution. Another well-versed lawyer that you can kind of take a look at is someone by the name of Alan Dershowitz. Now, Dershowitz, he has a bit of a left-leaning slant. However, he is honest for the most part, when he's talking about legal matters. In other words, he doesn't present himself as being able to, or as being slanted either left or right when it comes to legal matters. He sticks to the charges. He sticks to the law. He sticks to the interpretation of the law. And then, of course, we have a guy by the name of Jonathan Turley. Now, Jonathan Turley writes blogs about the legal issues of the day and articles and so on and so forth. Now, what happened here, and I'm going to show you this here in just a second, but what happened here is Mark Levin made a comment and proposed a potential legal out for President Trump, because one of the things about this Georgia thing is that all of the right has been swirling around this, and even Ben Shapiro is also a lawyer as well by schooling. He did go to law school, but a lot of people have been saying that if Trump gets convicted in Georgia, he cannot pardon himself should he become president. And so this sets up an interesting conversation about the constitutionality of whether or not Trump could actually pardon himself once he gets in office of all of these charges. Now, there is no confusion. Everybody pretty much knows that everything on a federal level, Trump would be able to go ahead and pardon himself should he become president. The question is, because of the fact that Georgia is being tried and the charges are in Georgia, just like with the whole New York thing, Trump wouldn't be able to pardon himself from anything in New York because of the fact that, again, that would be state charges versus federal charges. However, Mark Levin popped in and said, actually, that's not the case. And the reason being is because of the fact that the Constitution itself, he says, is silent on whether or not you can indict a sitting president or whether a president can pardon himself, even for the federal offenses. So here's the thing, is this is true. The Constitution does not say anything about whether or not he can pardon himself. And I'm going to pull out my handy and trusty leather-bound U.S. Constitution. I've already marked it off here just to kind of talk about this a little bit. And under Article 2, which Article 2 deals with the executive branch, okay, what we have here is the possibility of his pardoning. And I got to find where it is here, because I've kind of forgotten where it is here. Where is it? President shall be in command of the president. Oh, here it is. Okay. Oh, that's actually not it. Sorry, my bad. Where is it? Where did I see that? President. Oh, I'm failing here on live TV. But anyway, let's see. He shall have the power. I'd marked it. Maybe I marked it in the wrong spot. My bad. Anyway, the president does have the power to, basically the power to pardon, but it doesn't specifically state what he has the power to pardon to. Just says that he has the power to pardon. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting from that standpoint, that they didn't clarify. All they said was that he has the power of pardon within the United States is essentially what it said. I can't find it right away. I thought it was in section 3, but, and it probably is. I'm just not finding it right now. But, the thing about it is that he has the power to pardon, but it doesn't necessarily clearly define whether or not this is done at the state level, whether he has the ability of the state level or not. He basically, because of the fact that it states that it's the United States, not of the government of the United States, not of, any particular state. It clearly talks about the United States, which crosses a bunch of lines, because if you think about it, the Constitution of the United States is, again, referring to the entire country as it's put it down. And so what Mark Levin was basically saying is, well, he has the power to pardon himself at all levels because of a thing known as the Supremacy Clause, which essentially is that all of the states agreed that the Constitution is the oh, thank you, Tommy, you found it. Article 2 looks like 1, and he basically says in Garland 71 U.S. Acknowledging the president's authority to grant pardons is subject to the exception of cases of impeachment, and that with the exception, the power is unlimited. So apparently this has already come up It's Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution, which provides that the president shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. So that's the key, is the words United States. Thank you for that, Tommy. I do appreciate that. It has to deal with the, the phrasing of the United States. Now, if you take that phrasing, that specific phrasing, that basically means that he can pardon pretty much anybody for any kind of offenses that occur within the country. And so that's essentially where Mark Levin is coming with. And also, at the same time, having that power is not limited to just his, just him at the federal level. It also has to deal with the Supremacy Clause, which essentially calls out that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And so he made these comments, he put them out on Twitter, and apparently Jonathan Turley argued against it and was basically saying, based on our federalist system, which, for those of you that don't understand, our federalist system basically says that the federal government is separate from the state governments, and the state governments are supposed to have control over their own states. And the federal government just has essentially coverage over the total United States. But if that's the case, then there's some questioning in terms of legal precedent, that where federal statutes take precedence over, depending upon the statute, take precedence over state statutes. And so you could, there is an argument that can be made for this, that we could be dealing with something where he actually could pardon himself across the entire line. Now, the Constitution also, it doesn't state one way or the other whether or not a sitting president can pardon himself, but that's an assumption that everybody already makes. They assume, and most people do, that if he has the power to pardon, he can pardon anybody. It doesn't really matter who he pardons. So anyway, Jonathan seems to argue, okay, and I'm quoting Mark Levin here, without any constitutional basis, his reference to federalism in this context is utterly irrelevant, he says. It does not address the problem raised by the DOJ decades ago. This has nothing to do with the general pardon power, where a president does not reach into state affairs and pardon individuals for charges and convictions based on state law violations. This involves a sitting president elected by the voters to serve as president, who serves at the top of the executive branch. The rational argument must be that local and state prosecutors have no more of an ability to decapitate or cripple the federal executive branch and president than they do federal prosecutors, under the arguments set forth by the DOJ. So let me explain that. Essentially, what that means is that the Department of Justice has consistently, throughout history, has consistently stated that you cannot indict a sitting president, because in doing so, what you end up with is the potential to disrupt the federal government's workings. I mean, you're taking out the head of the federal government and putting him into a court for a while. So this is, and that philosophy actually kind of comes from another part of the Constitution, which this is really weird as to why they did it this way, meaning the framers. But here under Article 1, Section 6, it says that the senators and representatives shall, in all cases except treason, felony, and breach of the peace, be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their respective houses and in going to and returning from the same, and for any speech or debate in either house, they shall not be questioned in any other place. So here's the thing. Senators and representatives get immunity from certain laws. And so why, even though it's not expressly expressed, if I could say that, in the Constitution, why would the senators and representatives get that immunity, but not the president? And so that's another legal stipulation and stickling thing that could be potentially a problem because of the fact that, and you also have to consider too, these charges are being brought on the criminal act occurring during the time that Trump was president. He didn't leave until January 20th. He didn't actually leave office until January 20th. So his talking after January 6th was still while he was the sitting president. So these guys, I mean, I got to tell you, the Democrats are good at screwing things up. They have opened up an entire can of worms that I think is going to be very, very interesting moving forward. And I do believe that we actually do have a potential case, and I haven't described this even close to what it should. If you have X, or also known as Twitter, go and check out Mark Levin's post about it. He really, really breaks it down. Like I said, this guy is extremely smart. But there is a potential for him, or for the president, to be able to pardon himself, and I think it would be legal. So anyway, the Constitution, this is going to be a constitutional issue because we've never indicted a former president before. We've never had charges against a former president, and definitely not one that is the leading opponent to the sitting political party. So thank you, Joe, for setting us up in this particular case. This is a constitutional crisis, folks. This really is. And speaking of constitutional crises, I talked about this last episode, and I was mentioning how they have the they basically have the the government dead to rights in using a non-governmental organization, an NGO, meaning the social media outlets. They have them dead to rights for censoring free speech. Okay. But if you really, really thought that the government would stop, they're not. Let me explain this article in the Daily Caller. Biden admin pushes the Supreme Court to rule against red state laws blocking online censorship. Now, what you may remember is that the Biden admin, actually several states like Texas and Texas and Florida have enacted laws to stop big tech platforms from censoring content due to a specific viewpoint. This is from the piece. And the Biden administration asked for the Supreme Court to review them, according to a brief that was filed Monday. So this is an amicus brief, filed Monday, that is pushing the Supreme Court to rule against those Republican-led state laws that prevent the online censorship. Specifically, the Biden administration requested for the Supreme Court to rule against the state laws and in favor of social media companies' right to censor. The platform's content moderation activities are protected by the First Amendment, according to the U.S. Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar, who wrote the Biden administration's brief. Continues, given the torrent of content creation on the platforms, one of their central functions is to make choices about which content will be displayed to which users, in which form, and which order. Florida's bill apparently prohibits social media platforms from willfully deplatforming a candidate for public office and enables Florida to fine a platform $25,000 per day, according to the brief. The Texas bill broadly blocks platforms with more than 50 million monthly American users from engaging in viewpoint censorship, according to the brief. The bills are similar, but they're not the same, and the brief requests the Supreme Court to hear cases on both laws. Now, don't forget, we actually have another case, the Missouri and Louisiana case, that is working through the federal court system right now, and I fully believe that it will end up at the Supreme Court, which had to deal in specific. Started off with the COVID, all of the COVID information that was being sent around in response to the COVID, COVID pandemic and the shots and some of the information being censored by the social media outlets. And so that's going to come up too. So we now have a potential here for a free speech issue with in 3 cases. So this is going to be interesting. The Western District of Louisiana Judge Terry A. Doty granted a broad injunction preventing the Biden administration from colluding with social media companies to censor content in the free speech lawsuit that I just mentioned, the Missouri versus Biden, back in July. So this is going to the Supreme Court, folks, and I'm going to guess, I'm going to make a guess here that it's going to be a hotly contested Supreme Court case for this. So anyway, hey, I don't know if anybody knew, but apparently Biden has decided to promise the Maui fire survivors, which, by the way, that is absolutely horrible. And I got a little bit more about that if I can get to it. But he has promised the Maui fire survivors $700 per household. That's not per person. That's per household. And it's much less than what has been spent on Ukraine. So, the tragedy in Maui, and I'm going to call it a tragedy because we honestly don't know the full extent of everything, but the tragedy in Maui is really a bit of a problem. And it's just, this is disgusting. $700 is not going to get you hardly anywhere in Hawaii. Hawaii is one of those states that prices remain really, really high anyway, because of the fact that it's a freaking island. They got to ship everything or fly everything in. So, if you can't get it there, you're going to have to, do something from that state. Now, supposedly he is scheduled to go to Maui on Monday of next week or sometime next week. I'm considering that he never went to East Palestine. I'll be honest with you, I'm not holding my breath, because if I did, I'd probably die. So, again, this is kind of disgusting. Realistically, he should be sending a heck of a lot more than what is there. Now, not that I'm defending him, okay? I do understand there are huge legal hurdles to go through when it comes to, declaring an emergency, sending out FEMA, how much money can be spent, so on and so forth. I know that there's a lot of legal stuff that's going on. And I'm not quite sure where this $700 per household actually fits within that. But realistically, I'm just going to tell you, it's still disgusting over the fact that he even announced this kind of thing. This is just horrible, as far as that goes. All right. So, let me go ahead and take a quick break here, and let's go ahead and do our, pet of the week.
Please check your mailbox. A new message has arrived.
All right. And like I said, this pet of the week is submitted by Outlaw Dogs, but covers a sadly has already passed pup for us. So let me go ahead and get that up here. All right. This is a tribute to my AC girl, she writes. To make a long story short, she was the dog I adopted after my husband told me no dogs. Gee, I don't know how that feels at all, Mrs. Whiskey. Sorry. Well, a day later, I got this little black lab pup. She ended up being the best dog in the world. I know every owner says that, but she was really great. The kids loved her, and she was playful, obedient, and my best friend. We lost her 13 years ago today, and I cry every time it comes up. I will love her and miss her forever. So this is a photo. That's a nice story, by the way. This is a photo of Ace, or Acey Girl, as a puppy. And then we have, obviously, a little bit older. Let me blow this up so you guys can see her. And we have her hanging out on a chair. She's resting comfortably. Looks like she's a lot older in this photo. My puppy has got a mug like that where he's got white all around his mug. And then here is Ace with apparently a cat by the name of Moo Moo. And they obviously enjoy each other's company. So now let me go and she also submitted a video. So let me go ahead and bring that up here. Whoops. That's not what I wanted. I want this. There we go. All right. So this is a video that Outlaw submitted. I haven't viewed it yet. So here we go. And so that was Ace. Ace. So anyway, I'm sorry for your loss, Outlaw, but I know that we all know that Ace is in a better place. And that eventually, when we get there, supposedly the way this works is when an animal crosses the Rainbow Bridge, they wait for their owner to come across. And if that's the case, and all of mine are waiting for me, I've got one heck of a menagerie waiting for me when I finally get to be wherever it is that I go. So, all right. So that was the tribute to Ace. Thank you for your submission, Outlaw Dogs. Hopefully I didn't make you cry by watching it, or by showing it. But if you would like to submit your pet for Pet of the Week, you can do so by sending an email to fans, FANS, at whiskeymusings.online. That's fans at whiskeymusings.online. And ironically, you can also submit questions for whiskey there as well for my Saturday program. All right, let's jump back in here. I don't know if anybody remembers, but apparently about 2 years ago, we had a exit from a foreign land that didn't quite go as planned. And no, I did not intend on that rhyme, but that's okay because it was perfect in time. See how I did that? Anyway, apparently we're not the only ones that would be celebrating, by the way, of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which is, I mean, just the debacle was just a horrible, horrible thing. But the Taliban, according to this Breitbart article, the Taliban celebrates 2 years since Biden's Afghanistan debacle. And of course, once again, they're back into the terrorist thing. Death to the Westerners. Okay, so the Taliban terrorist organization marked 2 years as the uncontested government of Afghanistan on Tuesday, the anniversary of its takeover of Kabul, following President Joe Biden's decision to pull out from that. They didn't write this very well, but anyway, yeah, so all of those wonderful people that were over there that were enjoying Western influenced culture, things like putting girls in schools and allowing girls to be out in public without having to wear head to foot hijabs and all that stuff. Yeah. Anyway, after 20 years, we backed out. We let them go to the Taliban, and now the Taliban has been in control of that area. We have literally no intelligence assets over there. We handed over Bagram Air Base, which essentially went to the Chinese. And so, yeah, they're just, it's just a mess. Yeah. So the bombing, the 13 that were killed. I mean, I talked about that and dropped the first F-bomb ever on the show, there, during that thing. But this was just disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. And, what's even worse though, is apparently, according to this piece in Town Hall, written by Julio Rosas, Biden admin brags about stranded Americans they evacuated after the U.S. left Afghanistan. So they're still freaking going on. The Secretary of State, according to the Town Hall piece, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, not Anthony, Antony Blinken, marked the second anniversary of the Taliban takeover of Kabul by saying leaving Afghanistan was a hard decision, but necessary decision to make. He went on to say the U.S. government was able to evacuate virtually everyone who wanted to leave before the U.S. military completely left, but then added that they had to evacuate over 900 more people afterwards. Hundreds of American citizens, along with thousands of Afghans who worked with the U.S. during the war, were left behind due to the last-minute and chaotic evacuation at Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul. The historic blunder resulted in an ISIS-K attack that killed 13 U.S. service members, wounded dozens of others, and killed hundreds of Afghans. As you know, we brought back, and this is Blinken again, as you know, we brought back virtually all of the American citizens who said they wanted to depart in the course of the withdrawal, and that effort continued well after and continues to this day. I believe some 900 or so additional American citizens who told us at one point or another that they wanted to leave, we've made sure to get home, said Blinken. Okay. If you recall, during the whole debacle, especially after the U.S. military completely pulled out, there were volunteer groups of former Special Forces soldiers that were going in after the Americans that were trying to get out. You'll remember the stories of them calling and trying to get a hold of the embassy and people back home and so on and so forth. I mean, you also can remember the horrific images of the plane taking off, the big, I think it was a C5 Galaxy or something, taking off and having the, people hanging onto the wheel wells, falling thousands of feet to their deaths. This was the worst, outside of now the Biden bribery scandal. This is probably the worst scandal of this administration, the second worst of this administration. And this is just, I mean, to have them sit here and even remotely talk about it, you would think that they wouldn't. Apparently, I guess I was wrong. It's a C-17, not a C-5. But anyway, this is just horrible and horrific. I don't even want to think about it, to be honest with you, but, obviously we have to. And why this guy is not being, or any of the generals or whatever, are not being held accountable for leaving people there is just completely beyond me. But again, this is the Democrats. They seem to get away with everything. Well, another organization is celebrating this as well. China is celebrating the Taliban victory anniversary. Notice how they call it, the victory anniversary, and they call it a historic achievement. Well, there's a reason why China is happy about this, because if you recall, and this was also in Breitbart, but if you recall, China immediately started talking to the Taliban about their resources, and especially mining and everything else, because there are deposits within Afghanistan of rare earth metals. And rare earth metals, for those of you that don't know, rare earth elements have to go into all of those wonderful batteries that the frickin' Biden administration and California state governments want to force on the American people. All of these batteries like lithium, cobalt, etc., all of those heavy metals and stuff, they are required for batteries and for chip making and so on and so forth. There's a whole bunch of stuff that was strategically, something that we could have strategically held and prevented from, China getting a hold of them. And now China's got them. And China's got essentially a monopoly. I've been talking about this for a while now in terms of China's ability to handle or hold on to the rare materials, the rare raw materials that are used in electronics and batteries and all of these things. They make up, I believe, at the last article that I read, they control roughly 60 to almost 70% of the market for a lot of these mining organizations. China has made inroads into Africa, into Central and South America to mine these rare earth elements to be able to corner the marketplace. So Biden's CHIPS Act that he keeps talking about and making chips, silicon chips here in the U.S., we're already behind in terms of getting a hold of all of these rare minerals, these raw materials to be able to make these things. We're not going to be able to buy the raw materials from the Chinese and make the chips at a cheaper price than the Chinese. This, by us sitting on our hands, honestly, while the Chinese have been doing their global expansion for all of these things, for us to sit on the sidelines for that, we are completely behind the eight ball. And China definitely, is a bit of a problem. China is going to cause us problems. Now this is a commentary, part of a commentary piece here. The Center for Strategic and International Studies on July 18th identified China's control over gallium, which is a rare earth element, as a national security threat. Rare earth elements are crucial to the U.S. military, but China holds the key. China possesses 36% of the world's known rare earth reserves and controls 70% of the world's extractive capacity and an astonishing 90% of processing capacity. This dominance in extraction and processing gives China a commanding position in the global market, raising concerns about resource security and international dependency. REEs are critical to defense technology as modern weapons cannot be built, repaired, or maintained without them. Everything from the F-35, fighter aircraft, and cell phones depends on rare earth elements, as do critical space technologies, electronics, and semiconductors. Of the 50 minerals designated as critical by the U.S. Geological Survey, 17 are considered rare earths. Although the supply of REEs is sufficient to meet defense needs currently, extracting a small amount of rare earth requires mining a large quantity of waste materials. Yeah. This is, by not standing up to these folks and not like developing these kinds of things is just asinine. It is totally asinine. So anyway, I just can't. Jarhead, you brought this up. Jarhead over on Rumble says China will attack Taiwan the day after our 2024 elections. I actually think it might come before that. Maybe not too far before, but you also have to remember Taiwan also has elections the same month that we do. So yeah, this is just, now something 3 Chevy points out, we need to step up our recycling of these things. To be completely honest, there are certain metals and things that you cannot recycle. Especially the EV batteries and things like that. They're not you can't recycle them. They just basically go back into the earth. Once they're depleted, that's it. It's over and done with. So going after stuff like this is just we're behind the power curve, folks. We're going to stay behind the power curve as long as China Joe, who's been paid for by China through Hunter, is in the White House for certain. All right, take another break real quick. For those of you who are fans of the show and want to get some merchandising gear with my logo, my phrases, I think I drink on it, head on over to store.whiskeymusings.online, where you can pick up glasses, glassware, sweatshirts, t-shirts, tank tops, sweatpants, all kinds of stuff. Just head on over to store.whiskeymusings.online and take a look at all of the products that I have available to you. I've got stuff where the logo is there in all different colors, but I also have my phrase in both black and white. So there's some different variations of different products. So whatever your fancy is, whether you like the black lettering and the white lettering, head on over and take a look. And pick something up, and I try to keep the prices low. I'm trying to keep them as low as I can, obviously, but there is a portion of this that of course goes to support the show. Why not sport something like our motto drinkware, like a big old water bottle, and that has the "When I Drink, I Think" Whiskey Musings motto on it, or maybe even a t-shirt or sweatshirt that has the Whiskey Musings logo, or the Whiskey Musings saying on it. They come in long sleeve, short sleeve, tank top. All kinds of stuff. You just got to go and check it out. Seriously. And occasionally you might want to keep an eye open, but especially like around Christmas time, I generally tend to offer free shipping around Christmas. So if you don't want to get something now, that's fine. Pick it up for a potential Christmas gift for yourself or a loved one, or maybe that lunatic lefty that you just want to drive nuts. Head on over once again to store.whiskeymusings.online to check out my selection of all of my logoed and mottoed gear today. And thank you very much for that as well. And yes, I actually do have female tank tops as well as male tank tops. It's up to you. I've got this Racerback, this one here. So this is a ladies Racerback tank top. Basically, the Racerback has, instead of having the two that come over the shoulder, it has like one, and then it separates out and drops into a split. And so this is just the one with the motto on it. There is also one, I believe, with the logo on it as well, that you can go and check out. And there's different colors too. There's blue, there's gray. I've got white. I've got pink. If you like pink, there you go. Pink's it. Red, green. I've got all kinds of different colors in there. So go and check it out at store.whiskeymusings.online today. And I definitely would appreciate folks picking it up. Now, keep in mind, these are made to order products. I don't have a warehouse, so they are made to order. They will actually create the thing and then ship it to you. And they are trying to make things a lot faster. Usually it's about anywhere from like 3 to maybe 5 weeks. Typically, I have gotten some products within like a 7-day period. So just keep in mind, there is a bit of a change in terms of that. And I also have had things where they say they're still in production, then all of a sudden they show up at my door. So unfortunately, sometimes there's a little bit of miscommunication there. So just expect that. But generally speaking, it's fairly quick in terms of turnaround. It's not something that's really all that major. So do me a favor, check that out, store.whiskeymusings.online. And of course, the proceeds come to the show, and I do appreciate that for sure. All right. So let's move on to the next item, which of course is my, I don't know if anybody noticed, but Biden's gone on this rant, speech, whatever. He's running around and touting Bidenomics. Okay. And so, yeah, it's just amazing that this guy is, I go through every time I see him do this, either him or the White House or any of his cohorts like Representative Jeffries, Elizabeth Warren, any of those people, I go and I immediately tout all of the bad things that have happened. But apparently he just is totally oblivious to the fact that people are spending additional money every month. Now, if you recall last episode, I talked about how there was a breakdown, and they basically said that Americans are spending an average of $709 more per month for basic necessities. And you wonder, by taking a look at that, you wonder why people were sitting here who are out there and saying that Bidenomics and our economy is really, really great. It makes no sense to me whatsoever that these people are they sit there and they just continually talk about this stuff and they keep touting all these numbers like 13 million jobs, and we don't have 13 million jobs. We only gained back 10 to 11 million from the first ever artificial shutdown in history, economic shutdown in history. But anyway, he apparently went on a tour, I suppose, and at one of the stops he was introduced. I don't know if anybody watched Dan Bongino, but he showed this. He went out and they announced him, and he never showed up, or he didn't show up on time. Like, he got lost on the way to the stage. But anyway, Joe Biden, this article here from Dan Bongino's Bongino.com. Joe Biden has hit the road to sell Bidenomics to the American public, and he isn't letting reality get in the way. And so there's 3 particular things that they call out for this. So first of all, he calls out in his speech, he says that he's the first president to ever lower the national debt by $1.7 trillion. Well, the debt has actually grown by $4 trillion, or over $4 trillion on Biden's watch. So he keeps repeating that he did a $1.7 trillion debt reduction, when in actuality, all that was just expiring stuff from the it's just expiring stuff from the COVID relief packages and things like that. So he actually didn't cut it. He really didn't. And he keeps claiming that he cut the deficit, or even the White House claims, according to their fact sheet, they keep claiming that Biden cut the deficit by $1.7 trillion. He's actually increased it. In fact, we're right at the point where we're at $32 trillion in our deficit, right, or in our debt right now. So there just isn't it's grown. I mean, it's grown, and it's going to continue to grow because he keeps adding money to it. Of course, all those wonderful things being sent out to Ukraine. So, but anyway, further on down the speech, he talks about, he talked about witnessing the 2022 Pittsburgh Bridge collapse. Well, apparently he wasn't even on the ground when the bridge actually collapsed. In fact, he was 2 hours out, roughly, from when it collapsed. And then, of course, his last flub was that he was talking about the Amtrak guy again, which that's been totally debunked. You know, the Angelo dude that he keeps bringing up about that, in that story was actually retired in like the mid to late 90s, and Biden wasn't a vice president until the 2000s. So yeah, this guy, I mean, cognitive ability aside, he's been lying his entire career, his entire life. And he keeps talking about, you know, how great his economy is when his economy actually sucks. Again, he pointed to lower inflation, even though CNN reported that a new report came out that Americans were paying $709 more for basic goods and services in July of 2023 than they did in July of 2021, which was just months the first time in. The spending was also $202 more than July of 2022. So in other words, from 2021 to 2022, it went up $202. From 2022 to 2023, it went up an additional $507. Inflation is not going down, actually. It did tick up a little bit. And he keeps talking about us having the strongest economy in the world. But the decline in real wages and lingering inflation, 3.2%, which is nearly 2% higher than when Biden first took office. Gas prices, of course, and fuel and fuel and food are the two things that, of course, they take out of the inflation rates. And yeah, there's no way. How can wages be down and inflation be down if we're spending more than $709 more per month in the last 2 years? It's just not possible. And what a lot of people sit here and think about, or what a lot of people don't know or don't understand, is that's when he touts a 3.2 inflation rate, that's actually year over year inflation. Okay. So prices are going up at a 3.2% rate over time. Now, granted, that is quote unquote down from, 6 months to almost a year ago. Yes. But that rate of inflation, if you look at it this way, it depends on the steepness of the hill. So inflation is continually going up. I got to get bigger in order for you to see this. Inflation is continually going up like this. Okay. 6 months ago, it was going like this. Now it's settled out and kind of flattened out a little bit more, but it's still going up, people. It's still going up. It's not, if you want inflation to go down, he's got to get inflation down below what it was when he came into office. He's got to get it down below what it was when he came into office. And that's the only way for it to go down. It's not going down, folks. It's still going up. Regardless of what he and his press secretaries and all the rest of them say, prices are going up. They're still going up. They're just going up at a slower rate than what they were, 6 months to a year ago. All right. Another indication that we are losing money. Check this out. Global wealth drops for the first time since 2008. Now, who was in the office in 2008? I'm trying to think. What was that guy's name? He like came from or claimed to have come from Kenya. What was his? Oh, yes, that's right. Obama was in office when the global wealth dropped the last time. Apparently the highest losses were in North America and Europe, driven by high inflation, according to this Fox Business piece. Global wealth fell for last year for the first time since the financial crisis of 2008, according to an annual report released Tuesday. The Global Wealth Report issued jointly by Credit Suisse and UBS found total private wealth declined by 2.4% to 454.4 trillion, and wealth per adult fell 3.6% to 84,718 by the end of 2022. So in other words, we're losing money. We are not gaining anything. He keeps talking about this. It's just going, yeah, this is horrible. Absolutely horrible. And I honestly, I just don't get it. I don't understand why what you would consider normal, intelligent people would be talking about that. That they are not, they're signing, they're looking at things like GDP, which, by the way, GDP is really not that great. 2.4 is not a good GDP rate. If we had like a 3 to 6% GDP, that would be cool. But we're at 2.4. It's nothing but, slightly above average, if it's even slightly above average. It's just horrible. I don't even understand how these people can do this, how they can believe in this stuff. All right. So in the last little bit here, I've got a kind of a package here dealing with Hawaii. First of all, it was absolutely horrible. I don't know if anybody has actually seen any of the photos, but the death toll has surpassed 100. It's still going to go up because they're still searching for bodies in the rubble. This is just absolutely crazy what happened. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of conspiracy theories that are running around in terms of how and when the fire got started. But the most common and likely start has now been reported that it was a potentially downed power line. I don't know if anybody's seen the video of this, but 80-mile-an-hour winds. And if you get a chance, I'm not going to play the video, but if you get a chance, go to the AP News article that I have. They have a video there with regards to it. But howling winds tore through Maui, close to 80-mile-an-hour winds. And the one video that I saw, which this isn't it, but the one video that I saw had where the wind was actually snapping the posts, the telephone poles or the power poles, and bending them completely open, breaking them off, ripping through, the wires and everything else. For those of you that don't know, I mean, I've done calculations on this in my job in the past. Those poles are rated for a certain amount of both load, which is straight down, and wind shear, which would be side to side. And unfortunately, 80 miles an hour, I'm going to be honest with you, doesn't cut it. And so, it doesn't really surprise me any that the things snapped like they did. But it's looking more and more like the wildfires potentially were set by the down power lines and the sparks. Now, just like everywhere else, during the summertime, things get really, really dry. Now, granted, down where they're at, close to the equator, you would think that would be less of a impact because, of course, the temperature tends to stay when you get inside the tropics, the tropic zones, that they would tend to stay, the temperatures tend to stay a little more stagnant and stable than what they do elsewhere along, say, the poles. But the thing about it is with this is that, the cause of this fire is still undetermined. And so we've got to kind of remember that. Also, as Amy points out here, now granted, she put a wordy dirt in here, but Amy says the side of Maui that burned is in the rain shadow side of the mountains. They don't get lots of rain. It's not caused by climate change, climate change. Okay. So here's the thing. Initially, a lot of people were jumping on the bandwagon and basically saying that this was caused by climate change, the dryness and so on and so forth. living where I live, I actually am in the rain shadow, what's considered the rain shadow of one of the mountain ranges that are close by. And so my house and studio where we're at, we get roughly 180 inches less than the rest of the area surrounding us because of that rain shadow. It's actually considered or called the banana belt of Washington is where I'm at. And so, I totally understand where this is coming from. And even like right now, we're actually almost in drought conditions at this point. Just because of the fact that we haven't had a lot of rain, a typical rain, like we have in the past leading up to our hottest months of the year, which are typically August and September. Okay. Right now we're at we're averaging 85. And I know for a lot of you on the East Coast who live in Florida and things like that, you're laughing at 85 degrees, but that's not something typical up here in the Northwest is for us to do this. Okay. So what ended up happening is, this windstorm came through, you've got dry conditions, and then you add to that the sparks that would have come from a potentially downed power line, and you've got essentially the powder keg that would be for wildfires. And dealing with wildfires like we do up here in the Northwest and in the Western states, this is pretty applicable. A lot of the times they try, all the greenies out there, they try to blame climate change as part of the problem, especially here in the Northwest, where they've hampered the ability for us to properly manage the forests like we used to, like going in and cleaning out the dead underbrush and the deadfalls and putting in roads for fire breaks and things like that. All of the environmentalists have created laws that block all of that, even though that would be considered proper management. Well, here's something that popped, and this is out of my local news outlet here in Fox News 13 out of Seattle. Nearly 90% of the Washington wildfires are human caused. Officials on alert as fire danger lingers. So, and I bring this up only because of the fact that this is actually a pretty consistent stat. When you talk about the fires that hit down in Australia, many of those fires, when they had an extremely dry year a few years ago, they were arson. They were set. They were potentially accidental starts because people just aren't paying attention to what's going on. You add to that poor forest management, and now all of a sudden you've got a huge tinderbox for things to go awry. And so, these people who are claiming climate change, it's not climate change. It's the majority are either arson or accidental fires caused by humans, and the rest are, natural occurrences such as lightning. Now, lightning is often blamed for a lot of these, but lightning doesn't occur very much in certain areas like where we're at. And so, the chances of a lightning caused fire is just ridiculous. I mean, this is crazy to sit here and say that all of these fires are because of climate change. Our climate hasn't really changed that much. I can remember times here in the Northwest of getting, 80 to 90 degrees in the summertime in August and September. This occurs. It does occur. Can't say it's a common occurrence, but it does occur. And it goes, up and down. There's a whole bunch of weather-related incidents, but the fact of the matter is that these forest fires are not caused by climate change. There are other factors that the liberal leftist lunatics do not take into account when they talk about this stuff. The same thing happens in California. California's the same way. And Canada, the recent Canada ones, if you watch, there was a time-lapse photography of when they started and how they spread. They hit. I mean, there was like 5 or 6 of them that all popped up at the same time. There's no way that was lightning strikes that started that off. Why these people keep pushing this climate change agenda and everything else and blaming everything on climate change is beyond me. Totally beyond me. All right. So the last couple of things that I've got, I know I'm probably going to go over a little bit in terms of time here, but the last couple of things that I've got here, apparently Alec Baldwin is not completely out of the woods yet. Even though he basically was not charged in the Rust shooting. Some new evidence came out in the trial of the the weapons person. And because of this evidence, this report that was compiled by Forensic Science Services of Arizona states that the fired evidence cartridge is the consequence of a normal hammer fall from the fully cocked position of the hammer. Now, they basically are saying that the trigger had to have been pulled. And if you recall, Alec Baldwin said that he just like fanned the hammer and the hammer was what came down and launched it off. Well, according to this forensic analysis, they basically said that the gun fired normally, it did not malfunction, and the trigger itself had to be pulled, according to the report that was filed in the court. So now Alec Baldwin is back. He thought this was over with. And now he's potentially going to go back into court if they decide to file charges on him on this. So anyway, there's more to come on this probably, but yeah, apparently forensics have proven that he actually pulled the trigger. Also, apparently there's a Native American group that now is touting overwhelming support. Hey, guess what? Liberal leftists, not everybody wants to change all those names in all of those sports teams that you jackasses decided to push for. So apparently a Native American group touts overwhelming support to return the Redskins name to the NFL. A petition demands that the Washington Commanders restore the proud symbol to the franchise. So a Native American group that's demanding the Washington Commanders says, bring back their Redskins name, says that they have received overwhelming support in their fight against the NFL team. The Native American Guardians Association petition to put an end to cancel culture and reclaim the name Redskins is nearing 100,000 signatures as the NFL season approaches. Billy Diekman told Fox and Friends, he's a Naga advisor and Kiowa tribe member. He says the deep, rich history behind the name, the myth that it means bloody scalps or something derogatory is what we're trying to dispel. It's a status symbol for elite warriors. So apparently leftist lunatic cancel culture is getting struck back on. Okay. One last thing. Apparently a male powerlifter has set another woman's record in at a Canadian championship. And let's be honest, men physically have stronger capability than women, folks. They just do. And to deny that scientific fact, I think is asinine. And, I'm definitely not going to do it. But apparently Anne Andres, a biological male who identifies as a woman, won first place in the Canadian Powerlifting Union's 2023 Western Canadian Championship on Sunday. There, Andres set both a Canadian woman national record and an unofficial women's world powerlifting record. This is Andres' 10th first place finish out of 12 competitions. So we just need to separate. I'm sorry. There's a reason why we have women's sports, and I will continually say that. If you want to have a transgender category, great. All the transgenders can be against each other. That's just it. Okay? Sorry. But that's That's my position, and I'm sticking to it. Like Mark Levin always says, I said what I said. Hopefully that impression actually is good enough. All right, that is my final Whiskey Musings thought of the evening. Do me a favor, if you like the show, head on over to Rumble, because Rumble's my preferred outlet. Head on over to Rumble and sign up for an account. It is free. And then head over to the Whiskey Musings Broadcast channel and click that little green button called follow. Anyway, I always stream Wednesday and Saturday, so our next stream will be Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. You guys have a great rest of your week, and we will see you on Saturday. Good night, everybody.
The Whiskey Musings broadcast is produced by Active Eye Media, LLC. All rights reserved.